Hello and welcome to the Glory Talk podcast, a ministry of Glory Dance. I'm your host, Roz Mignona.
In this podcast, I am reading through a journal that I kept during my first mission trip to Uganda. It was a 12 to 13 day trip with lots of details, so let's get right into it. Well, thank you for listening to this Glory Talk podcast. I'm excited to share the journal that I kept during my first trip to Uganda, serving with Hearts for Africa, which is a women's hospital in a village out in the country of Uganda. And we serve women and also just general health needs for the community. And it's definitely a life-changing experience to go to Uganda and serve in this capacity. So I am excited to share my journal with you. I kept this for myself just so I would remember every detail and just sort of have, a release of the thoughts that I was having and the memories. But I thought it would be a great idea to share with you all because I really came back wanting to share the story, hoping to encourage other believers to consider that the Lord might be wanting them to do a trip like this, maybe with us or to another country, or I don't know, but just encouraging other believers to consider mission work. My trip started as an answer to prayer. For months, I had asked that people pray for my heart as I left my precious children. I anticipated an anxiety-filled night before flight and a broken heart as I said goodbye, unable to leave them. The Holy Spirit gifted me with strength and confident faith. I slept easily and well the night before we left, and I said goodbye to my children with a prayer over each one and no tears. The flights were long, 10 hours to Amsterdam, an hour layover where we got bad coffee, delicious croissants, and mediocre egg sandwiches. The second, more outdated plane stopped in Kigali, Rwanda, and continued on to Entebbe, Uganda. The Dutch airline did serve many decent foods and a stroopwafel at the end, a nice touch. Arriving in Entebbe started with great concern. There were mosquito-looking bugs absolutely plastering the windows and buzzing by the millions around the lights and my face. Other American missionaries shared their DEET with me, since the shock of the mosquitoes eliminated any concern I had of the toxicity of DEET. The sweet lady also gave me her paper fan, accurately warning me that I would need it. The airport and travel to the hotel was eye-opening. Cars driving erratically and diplomats with armored caravans carrying their passengers, as well as personal trailers pulling behind them to use as a bathroom. The best part of the ride to the Admis Hotel in Entebbe was the driver, Francis, who let us know that the airport mosquitoes were actually lake flies from Lake Victoria that do not bite. That was a relief. The next morning, piles of these lake flies lay dead on the floor or hanging on for dear life to the ceiling. The morning at the luxurious and contemporary Admis Hotel greeted us with relief and excitement. Uganda is beautiful. Breakfast was freshly made and delicious. Food was not going to be a problem for us on this trip. It was Sunday morning and we walked a mile to Cafe Java at Victoria Mall. We stopped in a presumably Catholic church that had music blaring from our hotel blocks away. After passing through the 4 males and 4 females security guards, we listened to 2 songs in a church with dancing and lively worship. Children stared at us Mzungus in amazement. It was my introduction to the great Mzungu phenomenon, which I have named it. We had a fantastic lunch at Cafe Java. It was extravagant American-style food at half price we would pay at home. Clearly, this place was for the elite to eat. We spoke with the Indian manager, who explained that all the Cafe Javas in Africa are run by Indians but owned by a Sudanese family who is extremely wealthy and owns many different large businesses. It sounded a little like an Italian mafia, but we were grateful for Cafe Java and how it helped acclimate us to Uganda. We walked back to the hotel mostly on back roads in neighborhoods instead of on the dirt and grass along the busy highway. And a monkey with turquoise testicles ran toward us and jumped onto a fence to let us get a good picture of him and his colorful display. We stopped by an artist who had a small gallery of his work and was painting a wildly colorful commissioned portrait of a dog while listening to worship music. Maybe one day we'll go back and commission him to do a work for us. Some children followed us, trying to have us buy their bags of vegetables, and we reluctantly had to refuse them, mainly because we had no Ugandan money at this point. We stopped under a tree full of at least 30 humongous vulture pelican-like birds. Back at the hotel, we had a grapefruit and citrus-like soda that's very popular there, and I can't remember the name, to cool us off from the humid heat. I spent most of the rest of the day researching videos and lessons for my kids' homeschool planning back at home. So far, I had managed to adjust to the time change by not sleeping much during the 24 hours of travel. However, I experienced dizzy spells that were likely jet lag, and once 9 o'clock came around, my eyelids shut no matter how hard I tried to stay awake. We woke at 5 a.m. the next day to prepare for our 6 a.m. departure. The chef and kitchen staff had prepared breakfast early for us, and I enjoyed some of the best breakfast foods possible. Watermelon and passion fruit juice, freshly pressed, a Rolex, which is their tortilla naan type of bread called chapati, rolled with a layer of egg, and a freshly made croissant and African tea with sugar. The coffee is instant Nespresso, so tea became the drink of choice for me on this trip, because I'm a bit of a coffee snob. Off to the Mission Aviation Fellowship flight. Francis drove us for almost an hour to the small airport in the outskirts of Kampala. Before daylight, drivers and pedestrians, including children, were walking to their newly opened schools since COVID lockdowns had remained for almost 2 years, and they tested fate by walking on the streets of death. Cars, vans, and bodabodas, which are bicycles, which are like motorcycles, also on bicycles, emergency vehicles, all clamoring for their space on the road, regardless of the traffic lines or rules. Francis turned down side streets made of dirt with 4-foot trenches for runoff on either side. Passing a garbage truck on a single-lane street like this felt like the Indiana Jones ride at Disneyland. 6 inches further over, and the side of our van would have been in the ditch with us. Taking in the level of poverty struck hard on this drive. On these side streets of dirt, rows and rows of square shacks with random pieces of wood and tin provided homes and businesses for families. Next to one of these shacks, a large finished home with a luscious garden would be enclosed by a high wall and gate. Despite such disparity, all the people would smile and greet each other and carry on with life as it was. The Mission Aviation Fellowship Airport, MAF, was totally gorgeous. The security check was just a small building with a metal detector, a desk, and a living room with couches, chairs, and a coffee and tea bar. Outside, the landscaping was a botanist's dream. The tropical plants we fail to keep alive in America grew to gargantuan size with ease. These were trees with peach-colored leaves and parrot-like birds that sound like clowns laughing. The airport overlooked a tiered background with thick dew setting like fog over the ground. It was stunning. The flight had a pilot from Switzerland, who Mike Van Deren bonded with over mutual ancestry. He was one of the guys traveling with us. And 9 total passengers, 4 in our party landing in Jinja and 5 in the other party, continuing on to Soroti, I think. The dirt road takeoff and flight was easy, with just a little swivel in the air as we crossed over the Nile River outside of Jinja. We flew low and could see the vast beauty and diversity of the country. As we flew over Kampala, we noticed clusters of communities in extreme poverty, surrounding large estates surrounded by walls. There were factories outside of the city, and the countryside was filled with farms of tea, sugarcane, forest trees, and other crops. We enjoyed flying over the busy highway as we flew to Jinja in 30 minutes instead of 3 hours. And the river in Jinja, the Nile, had long canoes sprinkled around. We landed in the Jinja Airport, another dirt airstrip with a 1-room office and bathroom. Cheryl and Joanne arrived with Majoke and Kenny, and we all packed into the hot van. We drove to Jinja, taking in the lifestyle of poverty and city life unlike anything one would find in America. Even Tijuana is orderly and nice compared to the Ugandan cities and towns. We got into the district safe for Mzungus and went to a beautiful cafe that we enjoyed delicious cappuccinos and a beef samosa at this cafe. I could have gobbled up more of the freshly made mini pies, brownies, and other pastries available, but I did hold back. We did some shopping with Joanne at the market, then the little souvenir shops. I got my first lesson in middle-class Ugandan grocery shopping. though this small market was by far the biggest market we would go to, besides the one we went to at Victoria Mall in Entebbe. I bought some items from a couple shops run by two women who were so grateful for our business. One older lady who called me her sister, and Joanne, her mom, had a Bible and knew we were Christians. She wanted us to go to the local orphanage with her. Kenny and Majoke picked us up, and we headed over to another American-style cafe, clearly for the Mzungus and wealthy. This place was called Java House. There was a beautiful backyard with a playground and a monkey running through, and half of the customers in this place were also not Ugandan. A handsomely dressed man came over to say hello to Mike and Cheryl. He worked with them previously and had stayed with them in America at one point, but was now a Ugandan ambassador to Turkey. He was eating at the next table with an OBGYN who had recently married a famous Ugandan singer. Kenny and Majoke knew all about him. Kenny works for Hearts for Africa, by the way, and Majoke is the pastor of Calvary Chapel, Naluko. We had more burgers and fries and fancy watermelonade that tasted nothing like lemon or watermelon, but more like grapefruit. A wedge of orange, which was green, was in the cup. The restaurant was next to a busy road where we noticed a double-decker truck with cows on top of cows and men riding on top of the second layer of cows. The bodas carried live chickens, bananas, sugarcane, and even a queen-size bed frame or large chest. On the drive from Jinja to Uganda City, we passed more slums and countryside filled with sugarcane. Uganda City was bustling and not as clean and orderly as Jinja. We went to the bank and I experienced my first kneeling greeting from two little Muslim girls walking home from school. We went to a grocery store, then the open-air market for produce. I saw a Mormon missionary walking into the market as I walked out. In the produce marketplace, little children crowded around me as I took photos of them, but the littlest boy in a Captain America shirt was terrified of me and crying. For little ones like this, they've never seen a Mzungu, and they think we're ghosts. Another half-hour drive, and we arrived home in Naluko. The Hearts for Africa campus is an oasis. The grounds are beautiful, the buildings are beautiful, and the people are beautiful. During our time in Naluko, the Hearts for Africa staff became dear friends. You greet each other warmly every day. The Ugandans are very touchy people who are offended if you do not greet them individually. It takes time, but it is a blessing to show love to each other. No politics, no race theory, no prejudice. The mutual love and respect is shared right away. Cheryl's planning is seen in every detail of the campus. The rooms are comfortable with clean sheets, mosquito nets, mini fridges, furniture, and everything an American needs to be comfortable. Maria runs the kitchen and dining hall, which is the perfect watering hole to spend time together eating, drinking tea, doing Bible study, or writing on the computer as I'm doing now. Maria is a joy, cooking elaborate meals 3 times a day, sometimes American style and sometimes a little African style. I did not expect to eat so well on this trip, but we have had eggs or meat at every meal, and the overall dining experience has been stellar. On our first full day in Naluko, we filtered through our bins that we traveled with and visited the hospital. I continued to meet and greet with the staff and discover how Hearts for Africa functions. We visited a mom who had a C-section the day before and was wanting to leave already. I snapped my first Ugandan baby photo of her little one. We also checked on some sick children. I met my first good friend, Gloria, the head midwife. Gloria walked me through the prenatal appointment process and the little handbook women keep of their prenatal care information. A 37-year-old woman came in for a prenatal appointment, pregnant with her 8th or 9th child. Later in the evening, we visited Pastor Majoke and Laura's house in the village. Children screamed at us as we drove by, many having never seen a white person before. Outside of Majoke and Laura's property is a well pump, a literal watering hole, where children were crowded around with yellow jerry cans collecting water. At first, many were afraid to come up to us, but soon we had their full attention, taking photos and videos of them, then showing them their picture. They would laugh hysterically at the sight of their face, likely because they had never really seen it before. There was one boy sitting in the field, looking to be about 2 years old. Children would run by and hit him purposefully or accidentally. Then he would cry and others would ignore him or laugh at him. Cheryl and I went over to the boy and touched him and helped him up. His grandmother came to explain his mother abandoned him and she was raising him. But he is 3 or 4 years old and has bowed legs that make it difficult to walk a long distance. He only had a shirt on, no pants or diaper, and Cheryl suspected cerebral palsy. It was difficult to watch the culture of children laughing at the expense of others. When small children get hurt and cry out, usually for a mother that isn't around and apparently might not even want to nurture them, the other children point and laugh at them. With our little disabled boy, we encouraged him enough that he decided to put on a show and walk all the way down the street. The grandmother sent another boy, seemingly 4 or 5 years old, to go with him and hold his hand. As the other children laughed at him, probably thinking we would laugh too, I went to the helping child without a mutual language and showed him that it was a good thing to help the child in need. I had him hold hands with the disabled boy and then said, "Yes, good," and gave him a high five. My lesson seemed to be understood. The helping boy stayed right by the disabled boy and kept an eye on me to see if I was noticing his devotion. I pray the other children understood that we visitors are more impressed with compassion than childish behavior. We walked around Majoke-and-Lore's property, learning how he acquired the half-acre, and there's a brick-making shack next to the property, as well as a large trash hole for burning. Chickens and chicks run the land as they please. Goats are owned and tied by a leg or tree stump for many days at a time. There were pigs at one home in a little pen. Most properties have coffee trees, but bananas, plantains, and cassava grow all around. Mostly through a conversation with Laura, I learned some valuable lessons about how, despite all the animals, most of the people have them to sell only and cannot afford to eat them or the chickens' eggs. Everything grown is used to sell. Men find work to do and often spend most of it on alcohol. A decent wage for this village is less than $1 per day. The family across from Majoke-and-Lore's house has 14 children. With families this large, they can only afford to send 1 or 2 children in a family to school. The youngest children spend their days fetching water or building fires and playing with balls made of plastic and string, or finding things to do on the streets with other children. Children often care for the other children. By 9 years old, a young girl can make food for the whole family. By 3 years old, a child can build a fire and do basic skills to help the family. Many children younger than 3 are on their own, hoping someone will notice when they are thirsty and give them water. Nurturing children is not part of the culture like it is in America. There's much more to say about the family dynamics in Uganda, but that is a novel itself. We toured the inside of their beautiful home, still no running water, just bucket fill-ups from the local well, but overall it was a luxurious home compared to the brick shacks of the community. We were driven back to our compound and enjoyed a full meal with new perspective on how truly blessed we are. Wednesday was a slow day. I spent time in the hospital with Gloria, and it was hot and no moms were in active labor, so we discovered a mutual love for worship music and sang a little together. Harriet, a nurse, was getting a prenatal visit as she was newly pregnant with her first child. The 2 moms laboring on the campus were first-time moms and were in early labor. We had a long way to go. Before leaving for 4 p.m. church, we checked on the moms, and one of them, Maggie, was on saline IV for dehydration, and her baby was having high heart rate levels. But with the IV, the heart rate was coming down. We enjoyed a lovely time at church with lively music and a bilingual message from Exodus with Uncle Ben preaching, who is also a hospital clinician, and Paul interpreting. The church meets in a large pole barn, and a tent is out in the lot for the children. We toured the property and the future home of a large Calvary Chapel Naluko, as well as the future location of missionary housing close by. The property sits on a high point with a gorgeous view of miles of tiered landscape in the distance. During our tour, we met a girl with photosensitivity issue. We found small sunglasses for her and made a braided string to hold them on her head to bring back for church to her on Sunday. Back at home, we enjoyed more amazing food and crashed into bed, but we were abruptly wakened at about 10:45. We heard cars and gates opening and lots of activity outside. In the next room, Mike was pounding on the door and yelling for Cheryl. We saw flashlights whirling around the door and didn't know what to think. Brendan got dressed and went outside to find the guard and Maria talking. Apparently, Cheryl was called into the hospital, but locked Mike in the room because the doors lock on the inside and outside. Everything was okay, but the whole event got us worked up, and I couldn't decide if I should go to the hospital or not, but I figured Cheryl would have called me in if she wanted me to go, so I finally fell back asleep. Early the next morning, Brendan got up and ran to the bathroom. He was sick. He was very sick. After being sick for a while, he was sitting in the bathroom shivering and then laying on the floor shivering and was very uneasy and very concerned. I let our team know, and Cheryl called for the clinician to do his blood. After a while, the results came back. It was malaria. Despite taking the prophylactic medication, he got it. It was actually a relief because if it was a contagious virus, we would likely all be getting it soon. Brendan's team, Henry and Rose, put a saline IV in with the medication, and within 10 minutes, he was feeling better. He stabilized, and for the next couple days, everyone was asking me if he was doing well. It was a blessing that so many were concerned for him. When he stabilized, I went to the hospital with Cheryl, unaware that this day would be one of the most intense childbirth days I could ever experience. I have to be careful to share everything that I wrote in my journal here because I do want to protect the privacy of patients. But basically, this mom had undiagnosed malaria and fever, and her blood platelets were very low, and it was just a very dangerous situation for birth or C-section, but it was ultimately determined that she would have a C-section. The C-section was very eventful and difficult and had problem after problem, so it wasn't a smooth operation. However, the baby and mom miraculously survived. I did step aside at one point to pray with a midwife named Annette, and we did get a baby breathing and mom sewn up, but it was a very intense situation. A couple notes to share on it, though, were that the baby did have her head nicked by the knife. So I got to hold the baby for a couple hours. She was extremely calm and peaceful, although she was very stable. So I held her while they did the stitching. And just a note about the C-sections, a spinal block is typically used. Ideally, general anesthesia is used in emergency situations. They do not have epidurals. So that just creates a sticky situation because you really want to avoid general anesthesia at all costs because it is very difficult to do well and often will result in a baby not able to wake up enough to even breathe. So it's a very difficult situation to continue to pray for as C-section is available, but it's not a guarantee that everything will turn out well, not to mention the risk for infection and post-surgery issues. Anyway, I'm reading through my journal to see where I can pick back up before, as to not share too much information. So while we were caring for new little baby Natasha and dealing with her little head wound, another mom was laboring and was a first-time mom, and she had her mother and other caretakers close by. And this woman was all drama. She dropped to the floor during contractions, and she was pretty uncooperative. I'll move on, but baby coming out was okay. Baby needed a little help to get going, which was okay and normal, and mom was fine, except she had a retained placenta. So this is another medical emergency. It was pretty dramatic, and we called the doctor in to take care of that. And without sharing too much detail, I'll just move on. And we did bring little baby Natasha to her mom, who was pretty out of it after the surgery was over. So she did recognize that it was her baby and was a very sweet girl, very happy to have her mom there. And the mom's mother, so grandma of the new baby, was there to help take care of the baby. However, this mom had her own 2-year-old baby that was there she was taking care of. So very common, but interesting to witness. As we walked home to go to bed, we could hear the poor mom dealing with that retained placenta emergency. And it was just such an explosive day between Brendan's malaria and these births. We ate some soup. We saw this beautiful butterfly with an owl-like print on its wings, and then just totally crashed into bed. Friday was another incredibly full day. After a slow morning, we prepared to leave for an afternoon outreach clinic while the boys and Joanne went to Jinja and Uganda City all day to shop for mechanical parts and general supplies. I had no clue what was in store for me at this outreach. We packed 10 people into an 8-seater special custom safari van that everyone drives there. And a little side note on that, these people did not seem to wear deodorant, and there's not really laundry machines everywhere. So anyway, we drove through a few villages. We passed through a little trading center of a village area, and then we turned onto a very uneven road for a few miles up a little hill to the school. We arrived on a campus with hundreds of school kids staring at every move we made once we got out of the car. We noticed children fanning others on the ground, and the schoolmaster told us they were reacting to a medication the government sent them for parasites. And at first we thought they were fainting, but they were actually falling asleep. It was crazy. Once the tables were set up and we were prepackaging medications to give, the hundreds of children were brought around to sit by us. It was like being in a fishbowl. They stared at every move I made, laughing and smiling. I would wave or take some pictures, but it was a lot to handle for me. I kept trying to make myself look busy, but it was no use. I had to be given a job to do. Fortunately, prenatals were sent to a primary 2 classroom for the day. The room had broken windows with metal bars enclosing them. The floors were dirty concrete with a pile of dirt and whole corn on the floor in the corner. A rat visited, but it noticed we were there and left. A large gecko hung around on the walls, and chickens kept visiting to grab corn. There were multiple layers of barely legible chalk writing on a large chalkboard and a couple tattered posters with letters and pictures on the back walls. The desks were uneven wood benches with attached long desks. 1800s schoolhouses in the United States would be a luxury compared to this. Throughout the day, we did the prenatal appointments with women who would drop in every half hour. Children would climb on the windows or peek through the holes in the door to get a glimpse of us Mzungus. The women we saw were as young as 15, a mentally ill girl who had married a mentally ill boy and was now pregnant, and the boy's mother came to let us know about the situation to help get any information she needed. And this mentally ill girl didn't even know her birthday or age and was about 19 weeks pregnant. And she also had a contagious skin condition that we realized as we were doing our appointment. A 35-year-old and 40-year-old were both pregnant with their 7th child, and we listened to heartbeats with the Doppler on those over 20 weeks and pretended to listen to heartbeats on those not yet 20 weeks just to not offend anyone or let them think we didn't want to care for them by saying we weren't going to Doppler them if they were under 20 weeks. So we just did it anyway. Annette was with us, and she did a presentation with the women on pregnancy, birth, and the type of care you can get at Nolico Women's Hospital. When discussing nutrition, Cheryl asked them to raise their hand if they could afford to eat 1 egg every day. No one rose their hand. One girl offered that she could afford 1 egg per week. Cheryl looked at me for help with ideas for affordable, high-protein foods, but I was at a loss. I have much to learn and understand about the level of poverty these women live with. While we were doing our visits and presentation, there was a big soccer game or football game that attracted most of the surrounding village. Our village has a team which was playing and included many of the Hearts for Africa staff members. We walked out, and when we had finished, the game was over. I had caught glimpses out the windows as the children who were trying to look in scurried away. Our van arrived right on time, only to tell us that they had to come back for us since the van was already full. We thought they said someone was just minutes away from coming to get us, but it was over an hour that we waited. We stood there for a couple minutes with hundreds of eyeballs just staring at every move. I couldn't take it anymore. I approached them to take pictures and videos, try to communicate, then finally I just danced with them. I first tried to play music and have them dance, but only a couple kids tried to booty shake, which is what they do in Uganda. I managed, not easily, to get them to hold hands in a big circle, and we chasséed and marched in circles together. Still, no van. As the kids waited for my next move, I did a cartwheel and had them copy me, and then I did a round-off, and they copied again. Still no van. It was hot. The sun was going down, and I was getting wet with sweat. I managed to put on my dance teacher hat and got them to line up. I had them do some across-the-floor moves in groups. We did chassé, and then we did chassé with runs, and then chassé with runs and a leap. Still no van. I attempted, mostly unsuccessfully, to separate them into girls and boys. I showed the boys how to properly bow and the girls how to properly curtsy. Still no van. It was getting dark, and I said goodbye back and forth 100 times as I sat down with Cheryl, whose blood sugar had been dropping for hours. The kids all crowded less than a foot away from me, still waiting for another move. I sat them down and tried to teach them Jesus loves me, line by line. These children are very musical and mimicked me very well. After recording our finished lessons, I had Annette translate to the children that we were there because we loved Jesus. They all clapped and said they love Jesus and Satan is bad. We sat with our audience for another 10 or 15 minutes, encouraging them to get home so they wouldn't get a beating, and finally our van came. 11 adults crammed into the 8-seater, and we made a 3-mile-per-hour trek down the bumpy, pothole-filled hill. After a handful of stops to drop off passengers and passing through the trading center that came totally alive after sundown, we made it home. We ate quickly and crashed again. On Saturday morning, I spent time outside with baby Natasha while talking to Henry about Brennan's completely improved condition, as well as the condition of the moms and babies inside. The clinician, Henry, played with the babies, which was very sweet considering the rarity of seeing men being affectionate with children. We checked on the moms and everyone was doing well. Some sick toddlers were admitted in the hospital and being cared for. All was well. Maria made the most incredible lunch for us. Traditional posho with beans, freshly made chapati, and the most delicious garlicky chicken and vegetable stir-fry. We were supposed to eat light because we were heading out to a women's Bible study at Laura's house, which would include a meal, but I couldn't help myself, and I'm glad I savored it. The meal at Laura's house was later in the evening, and it was matoke with G-nut sauce. Not a fan. Matoke is like mashed potatoes with plantains, but it's very, very bland. More bland than potatoes and more bland than plantains. And the G-nut is like a peanut. So they make a thickened sauce out of it, and it has an ashy purple-brown hue to it. And I'll just say it looks like another unpleasant thing. And to be polite, I ate as much as I could. It wasn't horrible, it was just bland. The G-nut flavor was nice, and the women at the study gave us funny looks since we ate with a fork, because they all comfortably ate with their hands. One note on our food. It is all wonderful, but they use highly processed vegetable oil for everything. I probably ate more vegetable oil on this trip than the entire last year of my life. The milk is also so pasteurized that it's shelf stable, and they sell it in bags in the supermarkets on the aisles. They only refrigerate it after opening, if you can, to keep it cold. During the Bible study, and also during the church services, a message is given in both Ugandan and English. So at our Bible study, Laura, a very wise young new bride, taught from Esther 3. Most of the women did not own or bring a Bible and had not heard of the story of Esther. Almost 50 women came, with some young children. We ran out of chairs and many women sat on the floor on a mat. Chickens, including hens with clutches of chicks, passed through our study. The women probably laughed inside as I took pictures of chickens during the Bible study. The study ended with the meal, and Brendan returned with Mike Van Deren on the ATVs. They had spent the day driving for miles exploring the area. I drove an ATV with Brendan behind me back to the compound, and we had a late dinner, another feast of chicken with a syrupy sauce. The guys had been working on the water pressure all week, and the project had finished. I enjoyed a luxurious, full-pressure shower from our rain-head shower head. However, the amount of water was too much for the water heater, so it was a bit of a cool shower, but not bad after a long, hot day in the dirt. On Sunday morning, we prepared for church. We were late and missed most of the worship, unfortunately. As greatly honored guests, we were asked on stage to greet the congregation. Majoke gave a wonderful sermon in Romans 9, with Paul enthusiastically translating into Ugandan. Greeting the church members was a pleasure, with warm handshakes and hugs all around. We gave the little girl with photosensitivity her glasses, and she seemed to like them. After church, we all ate lunch with freshly made soup and potato rolls with real butter. Iced tea with freshly made passion fruit juice were on the side. I was not expecting to eat so well on this trip, if I haven't already said that. It was a lazy afternoon, and Brendan and I made a video tour of the compound and inside the hospital. I got the chance to visit with little baby Natasha and her recovering mom, Maggie. One funny thing that I noticed on our walk is as Brendan and I walked together, we held hands as we walked away from the hospital, and the whole group of caretakers that were sitting outside the hospital seemed to laugh and giggle, because it's not very common to see a husband and wife walking together, let alone holding hands or being any more affectionate than that. Majoke and Laura had us over to their home for dinner. We arrived and spent a few hours sitting outside while the men played an unusual board game. We watched young boys and young men stack thousands of bricks that were cooking only days before. I walked around the street and played with the children, saying hello and walking to women, and I even pumped water from the well. Brendan and I, for a moment, played a dancing game with children hiding in the next field and also on the other side of the property on the street by the house gate. First, we noticed little heads popping out of the ground. Then Brendan started doing silly hand motions, and they would all copy and laugh hysterically. Soon we had a huge group on either side of us playing the game. Everyone was entertained. After a couple hours, the busy ladies brought out their incredible feast. It was truly a feast. Homemade everything: rice, chapati, yams, mashed Irish, which is potatoes, chicken stew, beef stew, fire roasted grilled chicken and beef, watermelon, and freshly made passion fruit juice. I'm probably missing something because it was dark when we started to eat, but there were large bats that screeched and darted over our heads, eating all the pesky mosquitoes. And we're guessing it's a frog that made a computer beep sound close by. The neighborhood dogs all showed up to find their meal for the day, beef being an unusual smell for the area and alluring pups from all around. Pastor Majoke shared many details about the customs of being a meal guest with a Ugandan, as well as his life story of how he ended up in Naluko. If it weren't for my severe stomach pains, probably from the G-nut sauce the day before, I would have enjoyed this conversation even more than I did, which was a lot. Majoke offers so much insight into the culture and lifestyle of Ugandans, as well as his wife, Laura. Monday was our last full day in Naluko. It was a hot and lazy day. I visited the hospital and found a second-time mom in early labor, not even contracting much, so I wasn't hopeful I would still be on the compound for her birth. I visited the other patients, mainly my Maggie and Natasha. We spent quite a while organizing medical supplies for the storage room in the hospital. I took a few breaks throughout the day in the guest veranda, and I spent time chatting about money and cultural differences with the midwives and nurses on duty. In the afternoon, Dr. Isaac and his American wife Rachel arrived with their twin 6-year-old boys, Aaron and Ezra, and their 4-year-old daughter, Louise. Dr. Isaac is a surgeon who consults with the Hearts for Africa Hospital. Rachel is a missionary who fell in love and runs a sustainable homestead and homeschools her children. She's from America. We had an awesome dinner made by Maria, who did not feel well all day. She managed, in her discomfort, to make fried chicken, fresh fried potato fries, sautéed carrots, and watermelon with fresh watermelon juice. Rachel brought a chocolate cake for dessert, and Joanne shared one of her buttery potato chip cookies with every plate of cake. We were stuffed once again. After dinner, I knew I needed to pack for our early morning departure, and I was feeling tired. However, I wanted to visit the midwives on night duty to say goodbye. I thought that maybe the mom from earlier in the day might be there in active labor. But when we walked in, a new mom was actively laboring on the table. The staff was talking about going to theater, which is C-section. My first thought was, why? This woman looked to be about to have this baby. But I realized that there is a massive lack of trust in the birth process everywhere. Uganda, America, and probably everywhere else. There's a challenge that faces birth work across all nations and cultures, and that is how to optimally balance modern medical intervention with the way women have been giving birth since the beginning. Too much medical intervention causes loss, as well as lack of ability to medically rescue those who are having problems with the natural process. Dr. Isaac and Cheryl looked at each other with a mutual acknowledgement that this mom was about to have her baby. Dr. Isaac said, "Cheryl, let's deliver this baby," with a smile. I assisted in the birth, applying some recent studies on pelvic manipulation. It's always fun to be able to use techniques you've just studied. Baby was born without any issues. It was a textbook VBAC. Within 45 minutes of stepping into the hospital, we delivered a baby and said goodbye to the staff members, and we went back and finished our dinner party. The next morning, we got up early and headed out for Entebbe. The trip was relatively quick. Pastor Majoke avoided major traffic areas with his knowledge of the back streets through Kampala. We stopped for a lovely meal at Java House in Jinja. Then I tasted a raw sugar cane in Kampala, which Majoke says is the only place to get good sugar cane. It tasted like sweet grass. I was not a fan. Laura laughed as I almost gagged on it. You literally chew on strips of soft fiber bark to get a bite of slightly sweet but grassy water, then you spit out the fibers. Driving through this stretch takes you past so many different levels of income and lifestyle. In the villages, you see people packed into strips of makeshift housing with produce and various products for sale all along the way. Children, chickens, goats, and sometimes cows just walk along the side of the road as boda zoom past you, sometimes with 5 or 6 people packed on and maybe a live bunch of chickens. The sugarcane trucks swing around down the road with 2 stories of sugarcane piled up, usually with men sitting on top of it all. You see mostly dirt road until you get to the bigger cities. By the time you're leaving Kampala and entering Entebbe, the roads are big and clean. The toll road costs a village person's monthly grocery bill, but it's worth it for us to use it and avoid a couple hours of traffic. We spent our final afternoon and full day in Entebbe, staying at Admis Hotel. We had an incredible meal overlooking Lake Victoria at a popular restaurant for Western visitors and wealthy families. After dark, there were literal swarms of lake flies, white ants, and other insects creating clouds of insects on the patio, around the patio lights. However, we weren't really bothered by them. I did some shopping for souvenirs to take home, which were triple the prices of the same items in Jinja. Lesson learned. We had another meal at Cafe Java in Victoria Mall, and then we packed up to head back to the airport to return home. I started to sing as we got into the car to head over to the airport, and Laura asked me why I hadn't sung for her yet on the trip. So we had a fun time driving and sharing our favorite worship songs. A song that she shared with me that was her favorite was called 1,000 Hallelujahs, which just so happened to be sung for the first time at our church back in California the Wednesday after we returned from Africa. The flights are long, yes. The stop in Amsterdam is fun, getting some delicious pastries and shopping for Dutch souvenirs in the terminal. We have a large selection of movies and TV shows to watch on our personal screens on the planes. I prepared for this trip with downloads of Marvel movies in chronological order. We traveled without any issues. However, going through Los Angeles traffic on the drive home from the airport gave me more stress than the previous 24 hours of travel. Most importantly, the trip home began the process of working through what the Lord wanted to do with us next. My heart was heavy during the trip home, but actually for weeks following the trip, it was also heavy as I dealt with the reality of such a different world I live in versus those who live in Uganda. I had expected this feeling, but you can't really understand it until you experience it. I came home overwhelmed, yet excited to discover what the Lord had next for me and my family. I spent a couple weeks not considering another trip. I assimilated my family back into normal life, homeschooling, activities, church, getting our house set up again after all the construction we had done during our trip. We had a new puppy that needed training. Life just got going again right away. The heaviest burden on my heart after the trip was the desire to share my story and encourage other believers to go on a future trip with me. It's totally cliche, but a trip like this is truly life-changing. God does a powerful work in us when we obey His calls and the challenges He places before us. There are always excuses and reasons we are able to reply to Him with: physical, emotional, logistical, spiritual. I know personally that learning to go, just go, when I know it's the Lord telling me to, is a difficult thing to do, but it is always the right thing to do. And it just so happens, as I read this journal to you, that I'm starting to feel like I'm supposed to go again. So I am already thinking about and praying about the next trip to Uganda. I pray that all who listen to my first Uganda trip story will be blessed and moved in some way. Would you actually join me to pray that any work we did in Uganda was used by Jesus to reach hearts for Him? Pray for our next trip and maybe your trip there or another mission trip that the Lord may be urging you to do. Would you pray for us to continue planting the Word of God, the joy of the Spirit, and the hope of Jesus in hearts and lives until Jesus comes back? That is our mission. All glory be to God, our Savior. Thank you for listening to this episode of Glory Talk, a podcast ministry of Glory Dance. Visit our website, www.glory.dance, for our membership site info, our mission work support, and also our email list sign up and social media links. Get caught up with all the Glory Talk podcasts of the past, and also stay tuned for the next podcast coming up soon. May God richly bless you and your family today. Bye.